2311 Racing and Forward Motorsports have refiled for preliminary injunction against NASCAR, and Toni Breidinger will join the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series full-time at TRICON Garage in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got 10 NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them straight on those really quickly. We've only got one paint scheme to take a look at, and it's Christopher Bell's 2025 DeWalt paint scheme that we'll see throughout the 2025 season. Scheme was very similar to the 2024 scheme. It does look pretty simple, though. I do like it. It's better than some of the DeWalt schemes we saw in 2024. It does look all right, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack in the 2025 season. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Titan Risk Solutions. As it was announced on Monday morning that Titan Risk Solutions will sponsor RCR in select races in 2025. And they will sponsor Austin Dillon, Jesse Love, and Austin Hill. The only full-time driver they will not sponsor is Kyle Busch. I had thought maybe there would be a chance they would run a third car with the sponsorship, considering they ran with Ty Dillon during the Breakout 400 in 2024. But I'm glad to see Titan Risk Solutions is upping their sponsorship. I believe they're going to sponsor Dillon for a few races throughout the year and the other two drivers throughout the season. But it's good to see a new sponsor coming in, working with them a lot closer, and really glad to see a Titan Risk Solutions will sponsor RCR throughout the 2025 year. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, on Sunday evening, Kyle Larson was competing at the USAC races at Merced Speedway. Now, in race number 2 of the event, I think in the main feature event, Kyle Larson, I think, had won heat number 2. But in the main event, Kyle Larson basically almost ended up flipping upside down throughout the race, and about 10 laps to go, nearly went off course, but he completely saved it. But it didn't matter because Kyle Larson had such a big lead, and he would come off the corner and win the race at Merced Speedway. This, I believe, is Kyle Larson's first win in the offseason so far this year. We do not know at this time if he's going to run the Chili Bowl Nationals or not, but I think it's really cool to see it. Kyle Larson, even though he did make a little bit of a mistake, can still go out there and be one of the best dirt racers in the field and go out there and pick up the victory. It's really exciting stuff, and nonetheless, congratulations to Kyle Busch on winning at Merced Speedway. Really happy to see him get that done. Congratulations to him on getting the win. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Busch Clash at Bowman Gray. As it was confirmed on Monday morning that the Busch Clash at Bowman Gray has officially sold out for the event on February the 2nd. This took a little bit longer than I thought it was going to take to sell out, but I do think a big reason why it took so long to sell out was because of basically the colder temperatures, because they're going to run this race in early February, and it is going to be extremely cold at night. I could be wrong, it ends up being like in the 50s, but it's probably going to be in the 30s or 40s, and I don't think people want to sit out on that, unfortunately, to be honest. But I will say that it's good to see this sold out. I think the event is going to be really, really fun. I don't know if there's as much hype for it, unfortunately. There's definitely some hype for sure, but I don't think the hype's as high as I've seen for other events. But really glad to see that. We haven't had the format officially get released, which I'd have to think that's coming before Christmas probably, so we'll probably see that here in the not-so-distant future. Nonetheless, glad to see the Busch Clash officially sold out, and I'm definitely looking forward to see that it's been sold out, and I'm glad to see they've gotten that taken care of and sorted out for 2025. Really glad to see it's officially sold out for the event. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about iRacing. As there was a report by Adam Stern on Monday, I believe, that iRacing is partnering with Microsoft to explore AI and further improvements for their drivers, their coaches, and everything that is associated with the event. This is definitely a really, really big partnership. Now, when it comes to AI, it is super, super controversial. We all kind of talk about the controversies of AI. But in my opinion, if you're going to use AI, this is probably the best way to do it, especially when it comes to things in video games. This is what AI is meant for, to make improvements. That's one thing that a lot of people want, is the AI to work very, very well in NASCAR. And again, I know AI is controversial for a lot of things, but I think especially for video games, it does make a lot of sense. So I actually understand this move completely, and I think it's the right decision to get Microsoft and iRacing to kind of work together in that vein, in that front. So I'm really glad that they're doing this. I think while AI, like I said, is controversial, I still think it's a good move to go ahead and do something like this. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that, see how successful it is going forward. But I'm glad to see they're partnering up with a new company, and glad to see that we now got that going on. Really exciting and good stuff overall. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Robert Wickens. As it was confirmed on Tuesday morning that Robert Wickens will race in IMSA full-time in 2025 in the 5 sprint races as he'll drive for DXT Racing, which I believe is one of the Corvette organizations, in 2025. Robert Wickens has been competing in the Michelin Pilot Challenge over the course of the last couple of years. I believe he's won a couple championships with Brian Herta Autosport and has been super successful. Of course, Robert Wickens, we know about the really bad crash that took place in 2018 at Pocono and has been on the way back to racing, and he would eventually, I think he said it's David Land, he'd like to eventually get back to racing full-time in IndyCar or running the Indy 500 in the future. And I think getting the chance to run in IMSA with the Corvette group of DXDT Racing, to me, is really exciting and really great to see because we've all been wanting to see Robert Wickens compete with a really good and strong organization. I believe DXT Racing has been very competitive in IMSA over the course of the last couple of years. So to see they're getting in the GTD stuff, and it's just pretty awesome to see that Robert Wickens is getting back into sports as a whole, getting back into motorsports fully, and great and really awesome, and glad to see that he officially will be with DXDT Racing. I really am excited to see what he can do with this program, so I do think he will be very competitive. I hope he can win a championship, which I think they've got a chance to win the overall championship this year, and I think in the 5 sprint races, I think he could win a race, which it would be very awesome to see him win a main IMSA race. Really glad to see Robert does have a ride for 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Las Vegas Grand Prix TV ratings. As it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday that the Las Vegas GP, that ESPN got 905,000 viewers for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. That is down nearly 50% from 1.3 million in 2023. That is one of the biggest drop-offs I've seen probably for Formula One events in a very long time. And it's also one of the biggest drop-offs I've seen for motorsports events throughout the 2024 calendar year. Now, what played a factor into this? Well, one, the newness kind of weared off. A lot of people tuned into the first race because of the newness of the event. You also have people that were tuning into the South Carolina 400 right before that. But the other big reason is because of the start time of the race. The race starts way too late. 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time is when the race starts. And I believe a lot of the Formula One fans are on the East Coast. So you really shouldn't be starting the race at 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. My suggestion going forward, though, I don't think that's going to change for 2025 or 26. My suggestion is starting the race a couple hours earlier. I think basically starting it at like 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time would make a lot more sense because you have more viewership tuning in because you can get people from Central Time and all that stuff tuning in also, and you're not having people staying up till 2 or 3 in the morning to watch a Formula One race that usually isn't the greatest as a whole. So I think one thing they should do going forward is start the race a little bit earlier. I don't think they're going to do that because of the UK fans, unfortunately, because where a lot of the fan base of Formula One is from Europe, and they want to basically cater to Europe fans. They don't really care about Americans as much, even though it's kind of changed, and they've changed their tune on that. But I do think that if they did some of the things that I suggested, I think we'd be in a much better position. I'm glad to see the ratings come in, but it's disappointing to see such a massive drop-off from 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. As Josh Ream last night was releasing some very cryptic tweets in regards to some rule changes that could potentially be coming for the Truck Series in 2025. Now, when you look at some of these cryptic tweets that were coming out, it showed that Josh Ream was not happy with a lot of the costs that are coming in. Now, we were kind of wondering what rule changes were going to be coming in for 2025. Well, Matt Weaver puts out something very interesting, and apparently it might be something like an adjustable ride height or something along those lines that's coming in, and especially with the prize money, all this stuff that's coming in for the Truck Series, which we've kind of talked about us on the channel when we do look at the purses for the event. The Truck Series race purses have been down massively. They've not been that high. And because, one, less people have been tuning in, and number two, NASCAR is not really paying out a lot. And they are increasing the cost for the Truck Series field. And what Josh Ream did say to, I think, respond to somebody, that they don't think there's going to be a lot of full fields in 2025. I do worry about the Truck Series a little bit because of the fact that, while I think they've got a lot of talent that does compete in this series, they are losing some of these backmarker teams. And eventually, if you lose some of the big backmarker teams in the field, you're eventually going to lose all the drivers in the field, and then the Truck Series might be gone as a whole. And that is extremely concerning, as some don't know what the future of the Truck Series is going to be looking like going down the road. Which to me, like I said, it's really concerning, right? To see that they keep adding rule changes and the teams really don't have a say on what rule changes get to come into the sport. And I do think there's some things that the teams should have a little bit more control on than what they're being allowed control on, unfortunately. So I would love to see that change where the teams got a little more control on the prices, but sadly, I don't think that's going to be the case at this time, which I find to be very, very unfortunate. Nonetheless, really interesting moves to say the least. So they're making them to spend a lot more money, adding like an adjustable ride height or something like that, which I don't really understand why you would add that for the Truck Series, to be honest. Not a big fan of that, and I think that there definitely needs to be a little more control back to the teams so they can have a little more control about the finances that they're spending currently at the moment in NASCAR. Hope they can change that going forward into the future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Spire Motorsports. As it was announced on Monday morning that Spire Motorsports has officially announced some new personnel for the 2025 season. They're bringing in some new guns because Matt McCall from RFK Racing will be joining as the development director of vehicle performance. Or Dex Geringer, who worked at Stewart Haas Racing, will be the technical director for Spire Motorsports. These are two really massive and huge hirings for Spire Motorsports. Matt McCall has had a lot of success with a lot of great drivers over the years. He got Brad Keselowski back to victory lane, and he also got Kurt Busch a couple victories and won one race every single year that Kurt Busch was over at Chip Ganassi Racing. And Matt McCall, in my opinion, has worked with Rodney Childs, I think, in the past too a little bit when they raced against each other. So I think this is a really, really good move. We all knew he wasn't going to be the crew chief, of course, for Brad Keselowski. As we know, Jeremy Vance is going to be the crew chief next year. But I think this is a really massive and big hiring for the organization in the 2025 year. As for Dex Geringer, he comes from Stewart Haas Racing, and he's worked with Rodney Childers, as Rodney put out in his tweet, for nearly 20 years. And I think Dex Geringer, which I think he worked with Kevin Harvick in the 14 for a long time as well, which I think led Kevin Harvick to a championship, worked with people like Kurt Busch, Eric Almirola, you name it, all the people at SHR, Danica as well, and Tony Stewart too. But I think Dex Geringer coming into the program is really, really huge too, because he knows how to be a good director for the team. And you look at Spire, they're building up their program, they're bringing a lot of new faces in, they're bringing a lot of people that are really helping the program grow and develop. And to me, it's really exciting stuff to see that Matt McCall and Dex Geringer have found new places. And you think about the other people too. Matt, of course, Rodney Childers coming in, Michael McDowell coming in next year. They're bringing other big names in, and they got a lot of finances and all this stuff going into the team, which we'll get to here in just a short little bit. Nonetheless, really excited about this and pretty glad to see the Spire Motorsports is officially joining, and I'm glad to see they've got some new personnel at Spire Motorsports for the 2025 season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, there was an article that came out from NASCAR.com, and it's kind of some comments that came out during the banquet week. But according to what they said, Kyle Busch is definitely a little bit more optimistic for the 2025 season. And he also reflects on 2024 as well, where Kyle Busch, for the first time in his NASCAR Cup Series career as a full-time driver, failed to win a race after having 19 straight years from 2005 through 2023 of going to victory lane. He reflected on how it was a frustrating season as a whole for him, and there were a lot of negative things that went on for him as a driver throughout this season. 2024 for Kyle Busch was probably one of the worst seasons of his NASCAR Cup Series career, but he still had some chances and opportunities that slipped out of his hand. You think about what happened at Kansas, where he was leading with around 30 or 40 laps to go and made a mistake trying to get by Chase Briscoe. You think about how he had a chance to win the Southern 500. He could have beat Chase Briscoe, but unfortunately, dirty air really came into play. And he came so close to winning not only Daytona, not only Atlanta, but also the Daytona 500 as well, as he was one of the strongest cars in that event. Now, going into 2025, RCR, of course, has made some really big hirings as of recently. They brought Richard Boswell to be the crew chief for Austin Dillon, and they also have Johnny Klossmeyer working as, I think, as director of vehicle performance for the program in 2025. I really hope Kyle Busch can turn it around for this upcoming season, because if Kyle Busch doesn't turn it around, I could definitely see him leaving RCR at the end of the year, because he technically will be a free agent at the end of the 2026 season. And I've been predicting that he probably will be out of the program just because of lack of performance and really because RCR's also been struggling a bit. But I really hope for Kyle's sake that he can really turn it around and start running a lot better this upcoming year, because I think Kyle's still one of the most talented drivers in the field, and I want to see him do very, very well. I want to see him kind of have that turnaround in 2025. Randall Burnett and him working together, which I don't think Randall Burnett was ever the problem, by the way. So I really hope there could be a lot of success for both drivers, and hopefully Kyle Busch can run really good with RCR in the 2025 year. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Hayek Motorsports. Now, we already know that JTG Doherty Racing is no longer a name, and they're basically transitioning over to Hayek Motorsports for the 2025 year. And Brad Doherty, who is still one of the co-owners over at the organization, though he'll be more of a minority owner over at the program, and said won't have majority ownership of the program over there as Gordon Smith's taken over. Brad Doherty basically revealed some very interesting information. He basically spoke on Kroger, and what's very interesting, he revealed that Kroger basically offered to still stick around with the program for 2025. But Brad Doherty revealed that they wanted a fresh start and they wanted to go a different direction. He also did reiterate that Kevin Harvick is not coming in to buy up the operation, and that Dale Jr. Motorsports, despite what a lot of us want, are not coming in to buy up the operation as well. They wanted a fresh start, and that's really, really interesting to hear. Now, apparently the Kroger people over there said they wanted to go to a team where they actually could be super, super repetitive. And you look at JTG Doherty Racing, or now Hayek Motorsports, you look at their program, they really, really have struggled a little bit compared to other years. Now, in 2023, they had a solid season where they made the playoffs and would have made it in on points for a majority of the year. But when you look at Hayek Motorsports, I don't blame them for wanting a fresh start, right? They wanted to try it and see if they get better. Now, obviously, there's unknown what sponsors are going to be working with the Hayek Motorsports Group for the 2025 season, but I really do believe they're going to have some new sponsors that are going to come into play to help them, and they're probably going to announce that probably before the end of the year. And obviously, people ask, how long is this team going to stick around, and how long will Stenhouse be with this program? Because Ricky Stenhouse Jr., by the end of his contract, will be, I believe, 40 years old. I believe he will be 38 in 2025. So Stenhouse will be 40 years of age, and you start talking about potential retirement at that point. And contracts can also easily be broken in this sport. We've seen it many, many times over the years. For me, when I look at Hayek Motorsports, I think it's good that they're going to be sticking around. I really hope this rebrand can lead to them having a lot of success. Are we going to see a lot of success, though? To be honest, I don't know. Especially with the competition that is coming into the series next year, I do worry that there might be some struggles in 2025. I hope I'm proven wrong and they can run super, super well. But like I said, I'm not exactly sure if they're going to be as successful. But I do think it's good to kind of reveal some of the information. It's interesting they could have kept Kroger for sure. And I'm glad to see they kind of revealed that information when it comes to the Kroger stuff, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Project 91. Now, I put out a tweet discussing this a little bit, and I talked about this on the channel on Monday a little bit, but if you've actually been on social media over the course of the last couple days, you've probably seen some very interesting stuff in regards to Project 91 and Trackhouse Racing. And apparently they said to Daniel Swartz, can you ask Max Verstappen something? Now, what could they be asking Max Verstappen to ask? Well, they could be asking Max Verstappen about the potential possibility of getting behind the wheel of the Project 91 car. Justin Marks did reveal very recently at Daytona, I believe during when it was announced that Shane Van Gisbergen was going to go full-time with the program for the 2025 calendar year. He revealed that they were going to be bringing that program back in 2025 in a select number of events, probably on road courses and maybe even the super speedways as well. And I think a lot of fans like myself would love to see someone like a Max Verstappen, who is one of the greatest drivers in the world at this point, a four-time champion in Formula One, becoming, I believe, only the fifth or sixth driver in F1 history to accomplish that at this point. I think many people would love to see Max Verstappen get the chance and opportunity to come over to NASCAR. And I think this would also kind of help maybe end a debate between him and Kyle Larson, because everyone kind of talks about there's comparisons between both Max Verstappen and Kyle Larson. And I think that if you get these two on the racetrack at the same time, I think it could definitely lead to a lot of success and a lot of great moments for the sport as a whole. And I think, let's say, getting Max Verstappen at Circuit of the Americas or getting to him like Chicago, but I do think Formula One's going into the time, so probably not. But the thing, like I said, is you're going to have to get Max Verstappen when he's not busy with Formula One. And Max has a contract with F1 through 2028 to race with the Red Bull group. So you're going to have to wait a little bit for him to get a chance and an opportunity to maybe race in the sport. But as for Project 91 coming back, I think it's really, really good to see they're bringing it back in 2025 most likely. I would not be surprised to see Connor Zilch get behind the wheel of the Project 91 car. I certainly think that's a pretty major possibility of happening. So again, I'm glad to see they're bringing the program back in 2025 for sure. And whoever they put behind the wheel, I hope they can be very, very solid and very successful. We'll see what ends up happening, and we'll see if the Project 91 car could end up running really well and showing the strength and speed that it is going to need for 2025. We'll see what ends up happening, and we'll see if there can definitely be success with the Project 91 car for 2025. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tyler Ankrum. As it was confirmed officially on Monday that Tyler Ankrum will be returning to McAnally-Hilgeman Racing in 2025, driving a number 18 truck once again in the 2025 season. Mark Hillman will be the crew chief in 2025, and Lee Uena will once again be the sponsor for majority events throughout the 2025 year. Kind of discussed this a little bit on the channel on Monday when the news officially came out, but yes, Tyler Ankrum is officially the second full-time driver to be confirmed for the program in 2025 after it was confirmed about a week or so ago that Dan Hemrick will be back also with will be joining McAnally-Hilgeman Racing, in 2025. Tyler Ankrum had a really solid year in the 2025 calendar year as he made the playoffs and had a career year for himself. Probably one of the biggest comeback seasons from the prior year. As he, like I said, you go back to like 2023 and even 2022, he did struggle a little bit in the Craftsman Truck Series with teams like GMS and the other organizations that he ran for. Now he's getting the chance and opportunity to drive for a really solid program once again, who's been really building himself up. And you think about some of the races early in the year as well, where he could have gone to victory lane. He showed a lot of promise, he showed a lot of potential, and I really believe that Tyler Ankrum could be an outside championship contender, but he's going to have to go up against people like Corey Heim and, of course, his teammate Daniel Hemrick, who I think has got a really good chance and opportunity to win the championship. And same with guys like Lane Riggs and Caden Honeycutt, who I think are going to have breakout seasons. And probably Roger Kroof, too, could also have a breakout year. But I think at the end of the day, I really think it's going to be a solid year. Now, what are my expectations for Tyler Ankrum? Number one, I think he will make the playoffs. I know I predicted last year he'd win before coming into the year, but I do think that Ankrum will likely make the playoffs in 2025. And I also think that he will likely also score a lot of top fives. And I wouldn't be even shocked or surprised if you see him get his first victory in 6 years. The last time Tyler Ankrum went to victory lane was 2019 at Kentucky. It's been that long since he went to victory lane, which kind of put him on the map in the truck series. And you think about some of the other drivers who could be in this series, some in the maybe the future get Chandler Smith perhaps, but I go back to Ankrum, right? Ankrum, in my opinion, is a very, very talented driver. He's shown a lot of promise. He's shown a lot of potential, and I think he's going to do really solid next year. I think he's going to be a contender for the title, outside contender, and I do think that he'll be pretty good throughout the 2025 year. I'm glad to see that he is coming back to McAnally, and I think that he'll have a good teammate to work with. Now, we don't know who's the driver of the third truck currently at the moment for the program, but we've heard rumors about Jack Wood being the other full-time guy, maybe Connor Mosak's the other guy, maybe Chase Purdy, but Chase Purdy, we're not even sure if he's racing at all in 2025 at this point, because if you look at his bio on Instagram, it shows former driver. So we're not exactly sure if he's even going to be back at this time in 2025. But nonetheless, really glad to see that we officially got confirmation on Tyler Ankrum and what he's doing for the 2025 year, and glad to see that he will officially be back with McAnally-Hilgeman Racing for the 2025 NASCAR season. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're doing a little bit of a silly season update. Now, there's been a couple really interesting stories that have come out in regards to silly season for 2025. Let's first begin by talking about Greg Biffle, as Greg Biffle very recently did an interview with David Starr that he once again would like to run the Daytona 500 in the future. He doesn't know if he will run the Daytona 500 at this time in 2025, so if he doesn't show up in 2025, there is a chance that he could come back in 2026. Now, Greg Biffle will be 55 years of age at the end of 2025 or 24, and then of course he'll be 56 in 2025, and then if he waits to 26, he might be almost 56 or 57 at that particular point. But Greg Biffle wants to be with a competitive team. There are some really good competitive teams out there. I could see RFK Racing maybe fielding a full fourth car if they decide to do that. Maybe getting someone like a Carl Lewis as well, but probably not. But Gray Biffle running for like RFK and like the number 69 would definitely make a lot of sense because that's a number that Gray Biffle's used a lot in recent years. I could definitely see Gray Biffle getting that chance and opportunity with them. 2311 is rumored to have maybe a fourth car. Speaking of which, let's jump to them real quick. 2311 could run a fourth car at some point in 2025. There's been talk about it. If they do run a fourth car, I think it will come down to potentially Corey High making select starts with the program. It won't be Martin Truex Jr. because Martin Truex Jr. is not running the Daytona 500 2311. But maybe if Gray Biffle wanted to go to 2311, that could be a potential possibility. Carl Lewis, Kurt Busch too, maybe Eric Almirola, something like that. Maybe Chandler Smith too. Could be other candidates to look out for who could get behind the wheel of that seat potentially if they do run that car. And then you think about Rick Ware Racing. Rick Ware is another team we still don't fully know the future currently at the moment. But according to Bob Pockers, there's two names that continue to be mentioned as likely candidates for it. It's either going to be Cody Ware or Corey LaJoie. Now, we do think that Rick Ware is going to run a second car for 2025. We just don't know if it's going to be a full-time entry or a part-time. If we do see him run a second car, I do expect the driver from Haas Factory to work with the program. I would think that Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer might make their Cup debut at some point in 2025. I also have to think that Harrison Burton has to be a candidate to run a few select races with that team as well. But Corey LaJoie and Cody Ware are the two full-time candidates rumored for the full-time seat. Many think it's going to be Cody Ware. Some think it's going to be Corey LaJoie. Corey LaJoie does have opportunities to maybe work outside of racing world and getting into business perhaps into the NASCAR side, maybe doing the podcast more in the future. That could certainly be an option and possibility for him going into next year. Otherwise, I think that it's going to be Corey LaJoie or Cody Ware who will get the chance to get behind the wheel of that program full time. If I had to choose, I would personally go with Corey LaJoie. I know Cody Ware showed some promise this year at times, but at the end of the day, I'm going with someone who actually I think will run a lot better, and I think Corey LaJoie, in my opinion, will be a much better driver behind the wheel of that car than I think Cody Ware will be. It's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the silly season plays out. We're still also wondering what's going on with front row in that car for next year. But any day now, we could get a confirmation officially on that. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about GM and Cadillac. Now, we kind of talked about the story on Monday before it officially became announced. But on Monday, it was officially confirmed that GM and Cadillac have officially reached an agreement with Formula One to officially join in 2026. They will become the 11th team on the grid for the 2026 season. Now, there's good things about this and bad things. The big thing is, it's going to be called Cadillac Racing. What do you notice about this? Well, it is no longer going to be Andretti Global. Michael Andretti is no longer involved in this program at all. But there will be at least one Andretti part of this program in 2026, and that is going to be Mario Andretti. Mario Andretti is going to be an ambassador for the group and help with maybe some of the decision making over at that program for 2026. They are going to use Ferrari customer engines for the first 2 years in 2026 and 2027 before going ahead and transition, making their own Cadillac engines in 2028. They also would like to have one veteran from the Formula One world come in and drive for them, and also a young American driver. So who could be some candidates to get behind the wheel? Maybe Fernando Alonso if he sticks around, perhaps. Fernando Alonso only has a contract, I believe, through 2025. There's a chance he could also retire at the end of the year. But if I was Cadillac and I wanted to see my program get up to speed, he'd be a good option. Valtteri Bottas, he's a name that many have mentioned as a potential candidate. And Bottas is not that bad of a driver. I mean, the guy's won a lot of Formula One races. So I could definitely see him being a pretty major candidate for this program as well. What about someone else outside of the bubble, like maybe not Lewis Hamilton, but what about other people like Marcus Ericsson, perhaps? Marcus Ericsson's a former Formula One driver. I know it's been like 6 or 7 years since he's been in Formula One, but why not give him a chance and opportunity, right? I think it'd be cool. As for the young American driver, it has to be Colton Herta. Now, Colton Herta will be, I believe, 25 or 26 at the start of 2026, but what about bringing Colton Herta in? I think Colton Herta, who's got the super license points that he needs, What if he wins a championship this year? Because I think if you win the IndyCar championship, I think you get a super license, if I'm not mistaken. So Colin Herta would be the driver that I would go with if I was to run with a young American talent. You're not going to get Kyle Larson, which Kyle Larson at that time will be, I believe, 34, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't think Kyle Larson would be available. Maybe Connor Zilic, but Connor Zilic is working with Red Bull, so probably not at this point. But I look for this program to pick up Colin Herta as the lead candidate. I don't think it's going to be Logan Sargent like some are claiming that that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen. I am bittersweet about this because while I am super excited to see that Cadillac is coming into Formula One, I am disappointed with the way that they kind of got treated initially because basically they didn't want the Andretti name. And I think a lot of what happened with the Andretti stuff, with Michael Andretti lashing out, I think it unfortunately not only cost Michael Andretti his opportunity to be part of this Formula One program, but this basically cost him a shot of owning his own team. He's no longer the owner of Andretti Global. He's taking more of an ambassador role over there. He's no longer basically owning the organization that he really built from the ground up many, many years ago. And now he's no longer got it because Dan Towers has full control of that program at this point now. He's basically making a lot of decisions. We'll talk about some of that with the Spire stuff in the future. But while the Andretti Global name sticks around, I'd have to think the Andretti Global name is going to change in the future and probably going to become the program that we'll talk about here in just a short little bit. I am excited for this though, and I think one positive is that it's more cars on the grid. The racing product will probably get a little bit better because there's more cars on the grid. You've also got a shorter wheelbase coming in, which I think that is definitely going to help things also going forward. But I think that there are definitely some positives to seeing Cadillac come in. But I also think the big negative and basically the elephant in the room is not having Michael Andretti be involved with the program. The guy who really, and I hope they don't forget him too. That's what I'm worried about is they're going to forget that Michael really played a role in this happening. And I do think they're going to forget, which I think is really stupid they might forget. But I do worry they probably are going to forget about something like that. And they're probably not going to remember him as much, which I think is really disappointing to see. But again, really glad to see the GM and Cadillac are officially coming in to Formula One after a long time. They're paying $450 million for the dilution fee to get into Formula One. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about TWG Global. Now, this is a very little interesting tidbit in regards to TWG Global, as apparently we may now know the ownership group over at Spire Motorsports officially. Many people said that the owners, of course, are TJ Bashire and Jeff Dickerson, who both have worked at Hendrick Motorsports in the past, and we all thought they were the owners, right? I think they're the figureheads because according to what was put out by Joseph Strigley, and you look at the press release as well, TWG Global are the owners of Spire Motorsports, Wayne Taylor Racing, and Andretti Global. What does the TWG Global stand for? Oh, you guessed it, that sounds a little bit like Andretti. There's been a theory going around for a very, very long time that this group has been actually behind the scenes the owners of this group for a while, and they've been silently taking more control of Spire Motorsports. I think that's one of the reasons you've been seeing a lot of the money, because TWG Global is owned by Mark Walter and also owned by Dan Towers. Dan Towers also owns Gamebridge, and also the Guggenheimer Group also owns the group over there as well. And Mark Walter is worth, I believe, $50 billion, or they've got like $50 or $60 billion in their market. That's why they've been able to pick up so many big-name individuals, and that's why they've been able to expand to a three-car operation as well, because they've got a lot of the finances, and they've got a lot of the money as well coming into that program. And that's one of the reasons why there's even rumors about them running even a fourth car for next year, at least on a part-time basis, because they have the funds to do it. And I wouldn't be surprised, well, they only can run 3 full-time entries, but they've been bringing in a lot of new names. Michael McDowell. That's one of the reasons why Michael McDowell left front row, because 1, he gets stability for at least 2 years, but number 2, he basically gets a lot of stuff. That's one of the reasons why Kyle Busch Motorsports got bought up by Spire. They were spending a lot of money to basically pick up Kyle Busch Motorsports. That's why their Truck Series program expanded a lot this past year. That's why there's rumors that maybe in the future an Aspire Xfinity program. Because I think the Andretti name is getting involved with the NASCAR side of things. And when you got Gamebridge, who is spending tens of millions of dollars on finance, among other things, in the sport, it's really building Spire up. And I think this could eventually inspire Motorsports to be one of the top dog teams in the sport. I think they're about a year or two away from that, in all honesty. The fact they grew as much as they did, they showed so much promise and potential throughout the year. Carson Oswald was a Rookie of the Year in 2024, finishing 21st in the points. Zane Smith really turned the corner in the second half of the season, really showed a lot of improvement and impressed me throughout the year. And I look at also, at times, Justin Haley and even Corey LaJoie had a few good runs with the program at times. And you think about even rumors about Kyle Busch in the future coming over to this program, considering he works with him in the truck series as a consultant, I could see him getting that chance. And we do know they're probably going to have 4 trucks next year, so they're expanding in a big ways, and I think it's huge for them to continue expanding and building up that program as a whole. And I think for Spire, having a group like TWG Global, who has a lot of money with them, who's bringing a lot of funding to them, I think that is absolutely massive and really, really huge. And I think it is a major, major win for the TWG Global Group as a whole to continue to work with Spire Motorsports in major, major ways. And I'm glad we kind of know who the actual owners are, because everyone's been wondering, who are the actual owners of this program, right? Because many have theorized it for a very, very long time. But now we kind of actually know who are the official owners of the program. And I think that there are some other big moves coming down the road that are going to be happening where this team can really take that next level. We know they're expected to get a Tier 1 support from Hendrick Motorsports, and they may go from being a team that's been in the middle of the pack to now being a team that could be a championship contender. And I really think that is going to happen in the next couple of years, where you're going to see this team eventually become a championship caliber organization. Nonetheless, really excited about this as a whole for them, and really great to see that TWG Global is officially coming in, and they are working with Spire to bring a lot of money and a lot of funding into the program. I think it definitely is a big win as a whole for them, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Toni Breidinger. As it was officially confirmed yesterday that Toni Breidinger will officially join the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series full-time in 2025, driving a number 5 truck for TRICON Garage. I do not believe the crew chief was announced for 2025, but Celsius, Raising Cane's, and Sunoco will sponsor her throughout the 2025 season. She is replacing Dean Thompson, who we'll talk about here in just a short little bit, because I do have a theory on where he is going next year. But let's begin by talking about Toni Breidinger. I did a video covering this on the channel yesterday. I definitely am a little bit surprised to see her going full-time in the Craftsman Truck Series, because when you look at her ARCA numbers in 2024, they aren't that impressive, if I'm going to be honest. She finished 4th in the standings, which honestly not too bad to finish inside the top 5 in the points, but she did not score a single top 5 finish, and she got outperformed in the points by Chris Wright, who actually competed for a few wins in ARCA in 2024, despite the fact he also crashed quite a bit throughout the year. But Toni Breidinger failed to score a single top 5 finish. And I think I'm a little worried about her going into 2025. Now, to her defense, Toni Breidinger did have a couple decent runs in the Craftsman Truck Series last year. She had an 18th place average finish, and she did get a couple top 15s throughout the year. Realistically, I think she's probably going to run around there most of the year, but I think there's also going to be a lot of pressure on her. I think a lot of people will also think that she'll probably have a chance to make the playoffs, which I completely disagree. I don't think that Toni Breidinger is going to be competing for a playoff spot in 2025. I think you look at absolutely the performance, I just think she's going to be running around 18th to 20th most weeks, but I do think she'll also probably get a couple occasional top 10s. I think the goal for her should be top 20 in the standings. That should be the ultimate goal for her going into next year. If she can finish in the top 20, I think that is a decent year for her. And I think that there are some things that she can learn. And in her defense, she's also a really good USAC driver, won a lot of USAC races. And one thing we're probably also going to see with her is a lot of comparisons to Hailie Deegan. Both are female drivers, of course, but you think about the fact that both had a lot of hype coming into the sport. Hailie Deegan had a lot of hype getting in, and she didn't do that great in trucks. I think we're just all can admit that. Did she getting caught up in a lot of incidents and wrecks that weren't her fault? Absolutely. But she also did not qualify very, very well and only had like 5 or 6 top 5s her whole entire career. Meanwhile, she also went up to Xfinity and struggled with AM Racing, though we've come to find out that AM Racing may be part of the issue, and it might not just be all Hailie Deegan's fault. It was partly her fault, there's no denying that, but I do think that. I do think people saying that she's a better driver than Hailie Deegan, also that being Toni Breidinger, I don't think is exactly accurate. Look, Hailie Deegan actually got some top fives in ARCA. She actually finished fourth or something like that, fifth or sixth in the points, right? But there was more competition when Hailie Deegan was around than, because in 2018 or 19 when she got moved up, in 2020, you had people in that series that were really good, like a Corey Heim, a Ty Gibbs, who was very competitive, two of the best young drivers we've seen in recent years. You've also got other guys like Chandler Smith who ran part-time who won races. So you had really good talent racing in ARCA. And while I think the talent pool is not gone in ARCA, none of the full-time drivers went to victory lane. The only guys that really won last year were William Sawalch and Connor Zilic. And the other two guys, one of them is a full-time Truck Series driver next year. So I just don't really have as high expectations of Toni Breidinger going into 2025 because she really hasn't done amazing, if we're going to be honest. I really hope, though, she can run well. I'd like to see her run well, because one thing she does bring in is a lot of sponsorship, and that's a lot of money. She's got a massive following on Instagram, a massive following on Twitter, a massive following on, TikTok. I think she's got over 2 million, almost 5 million followers combined if you combine her Instagram and her TikTok followers, which I think is really, really huge because that brings sponsors in, and she's also got to deal with Victoria's Secret, which is also very, very huge. I just realistically do not expect much from her going into this upcoming year performance-wise. I think the money will help TRICON in a big way. There's no denying that, and I think that's going to be really big for the program going into this upcoming year. But realistically, like I said, top 20 points should be the goal. If she finishes top 20, I think that's going to be satisfactory. But then as for Dean Thompson, where does he go in 2025? I think he has a ride for next year. I think it's going to be with Sam Hunt Racing. There's been rumors about Sam Hunt Racing being the likely landing spot for him next year. And Dean Thompson's an okay driver. He got 6 top 10s this year. Wasn't really great, though, if we're going to be honest. I thought he would really take a step forward this year. He kind of had some good runs in 23, but he just never really took that step forward that I think most fans were really, really looking for Dean. But I think Sam Hunt Racing is going to be the most likely team he's going to end up with in 2025, which, again, that's not an upgrade because Sam Hunt's worse than TRICON is in trucks, but Sam Hunt's also a team that has support from Toyota, which does make a lot of sense. As for Toni, I really hope she can run well in this upcoming year, but realistically, I'm not expecting her to set the world on fire. I think there's definitely going to be some struggles coming her way for sure, and she'll probably struggle a little bit throughout the 2025 season. We'll see how she ends up doing this year. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about 23XI Racing and Front Row Motorsports. Now, I did a video covering this on the channel last night, but it was officially confirmed that 23XI and Front Row have officially refiled for preliminary injunction with new evidence that they will be bringing to the table. Now, let's go back to the whole lawsuit at this current point. 23XI Racing and Front Row Motorsports are the only two teams that did not sign the charter agreement with NASCAR are suing NASCAR on antitrust claims. Jeffrey Kessler is the lawyer for the teams, while Chris Yates is the lawyer for NASCAR. They've been going back and forth for about a month or so since this lawsuit really started. Then they had their preliminary injunction hearing, original preliminary injunction hearing about 3 weeks ago, or about 2 weeks ago on the Monday of championship week. And they had that court case where both teams presented their evidence. NASCAR presented their side of things, while the teams, they presented their side of things as well. And both of them had to wait until Friday for a decision to come, which a decision came. And basically, the teams lost that original preliminary injunction hearing because Judge Whitney basically denied it because he did not feel like there was enough sufficient evidence to be received. Then the teams were going ahead and originally going to appeal this original one. But then, about a week or so later, NASCAR basically said they're going to remove the clause for the open teams. And then they dropped their original appeal, which we all thought maybe a settlement was coming into play. Nope, that's not the case. And that new evidence that they're going to be bringing in to this, which they're wanting the original case to be done. And NASCAR did respond this morning, by the way, by saying that they feel like that them trying to rush to get the case done is absolute nonsense, which is funny to me considering the fact you guys sent the charter agreement stuff the night of on that Friday. You didn't send it like a week before. No, you sent it the night of and you gave them 6 hours. So getting mad at teams for wanting it and rush and all that kind of stuff to me, I find to be absolutely nonsensical and really bad on NASCAR's end because you sent and rushed it out. Now, what is the new evidence that the teams are presenting? Well, they're presenting new evidence about one, Riley Herbst. Riley Herbst got announced a week ago that he'd be joining 2311 Racing. They basically want the SHR charters, and they really want, because they're supposed to get one of the Stewart-Haas Racing charters for 2025, as they are expected to expand to a 3-car operation. And they want that transaction to be complete, even if this lawsuit becomes an issue, because Riley Herbst and the team are over there because of that charter. And the Herbst family is funding that charter in a really massive and a really major way. And I think that is going to be some of the new evidence they bring in, because you look at the original cases, right? They basically were going with hypotheticals. And the judge, like I do agree with the judge on this one, bringing up hypotheticals is not a good enough reason to give out a preliminary injunction. Now, why are they wanting this preliminary injunction? Well, obviously, they want to basically they're not going to be part of the charter agreement, right? But they want to basically, in a sense, be part of that charter agreement while not having charters while the lawsuit is going on. If they're granted the preliminary injunction, they can compete full-time as an organization. They probably can have the transaction complete, which they think they will get the transaction complete regardless, and they do think everything will end up getting settled. Now, if they are not granted this preliminary injunction this time around without the new... And the other evidence, too, is them not getting Martin Truex Jr. to run the Daytona 500, because Martin Truex Jr. was supposed to run the Daytona 500 in a 4th car for 2311. Now, at this time, they aren't going to be running it, because Martin Truex Jr. will probably be running with a team like Legacy at that point. So that's some new evidence that 2311 and Front Row can actually present to the courts. And they can also bring in the money as well that they're going to have as open teams. They probably can bring up that JTG Doherty Racing, now Hayek Motorsports, had 2 cars at one point. They sold off a charter. They lost that ride within a year. Gaunt Brothers Racing. They believe they had a charter for a while. They sold off a charter, I believe, in 2020, or they ran as an open team. They didn't have to stop running full-time after 2020. And then they look at some of the other teams that have lost stuff, among other things, and lost a lot of money, and teams that have been part of the charter agreement that have lost money. I think both sides have presented really, really good arguments. But going back to why they need the preliminary injunction, they need it so they can compete as charter teams, so they're not at risk of losing a lot of money. Now, if they do not get this preliminary injunction granted, there is a chance they could miss races in 2025. The most notable one is the Busch Light Clash at the LA Coliseum, because charter teams are the only ones that are required to go out and run the race at not the Coliseum, at basically the race in Bowman Gray. If you're an uncharter team, you don't have to show up there. You also don't have to show up to the All-Star race. None of the uncharter teams have to show up to the All-Star race if they don't want to. Only charter teams are required to show up to those events. And they even talked about the possibility of missing the Daytona 500 if they aren't granted this. Though I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they are going to show up. It's still to be determined, but I think they are still going to show up to Daytona. I don't think anything is really going to change on that front. But as for the lawsuit, I think, like I said, both sides have presented really good sides to their cases at this point. While I think 2311 has presented a really good side to their case, I do think that NASCAR has also presented really good sides of their stuff as well. But I think what a lot of people want in the industry, if you ask most people, is they basically want to find a way for more money for the teams. The business model that NASCAR has right now, I think we all can agree on this, isn't sustainable for the teams. It's just not sustainable right now. And that's one of the reasons why they truly want this preliminary injunction, and they want to get NASCAR to change the business model. But one thing that NASCAR doesn't want to do is they don't want to open up their books. And that's one thing they're worried about. But I think that's what the teams want. They're trying to scare NASCAR into going back in the negotiating room, and they want to basically reopen the books in the future. That's one reason why they're having this preliminary injunction stuff in the first place, so they can go ahead and force the team, NASCAR themselves, to open up their books. Some of the information is going to get redacted, and the public isn't going to see some of that information, which is completely understandable, by the way. But I also do think I wish some of the information was public for us to kind of see. But there are other things that could come into play. It could change the sport for the better. It could definitely change the sport for the worse. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens as the rest of this case goes on. I think both sides have presented really interesting sides of their case, and it's been very interesting to look at all the information that has come out in regards to this preliminary injunction, the lawsuit, among other things. It's been a wild story for sure. See everything that's happened so far with the court at this time. So as more information does come out, we'll discuss it here live on the channel most likely. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Link description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Who do you think is going to win the thing in the lawsuit? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Toni Breidinger joining TRICON full-time? Let me know it in the comments below. I don't think there are more videos dropping today on the channel, so the next time you see me will be Thanksgiving. So happy early Thanksgiving to everybody. There will be a Thanksgiving Q&A dropping early in the morning. And then on Friday, there will be basically probably a Junior Motorsports team preview dropping, unless some major news breaks on Friday, which I'm not expecting. And then probably Monday, it will be like a silly season update or something along those lines. And if any major news breaks throughout the next couple days, we'll discuss here live on the channel. We'll talk about people like Connor Zillich, Junior Motorsports, Haley Dean, Kurt Busch, Carl Everts, Bubba Wallace, you name it, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Kyle Busch, all those people, you name it, we'll talk about here on the channel. Same for Ross Chastain as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.